you're seeing use cases of fall protection or prevention and protection so that you can see, okay, what does mom and dad need to do? They're about to fall. Let's change something in their environment. Or is it time now to have that conversation to move them into assisted living or move up to the next step? You start pulling all these pieces together. You can see the trend that we're getting there. And at the R&D stage, I would say this is time now for the executive team to go deeper and build out more of that strategic point of view.
Welcome to the Conversations on Applied AI podcast, where Justin Grammans and the team at Emerging Technologies North talk with experts in the fields of artificial intelligence and deep learning. In each episode, we cut through the hype and dive into how these technologies are being applied to real-world problems today. We hope that you find this episode educational and applicable to your industry and connect with us to learn more about our organization at appliedai.mn. Enjoy.
Welcome, everyone, to the Conversations on Applied AI podcast. I'm your host, Justin Grammans, and our guest today is Jean Machart. Jean is a transformation executive leading companies by applying digital and artificial intelligence to create future-forward products, services, and experiences. She enables growth at scale with industry-leading companies, Fortune 5 healthcare, Fortune 200 financial services, and more, and is prepared to lead the next transformation. She's an artificial intelligence entrepreneur in residence at Digital DX Ventures, a board member at Asbury Communities for Senior Living and Age Tech, and recently was the Chief Operating Officer at Children's Cancer Research Fund. Jean holds an MBA in Information Technology from the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota, and completed the Competing in the Age of Artificial Intelligence from Harvard Business School's Executive Education Program. So thank you, Jean, for being on the podcast today.
Love to be here, Justin. I love what you do for the tech community. You're sharing out really the AI, the latest in technology and application, and then you're consulting, of course, with your organization. So no, thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I love having experts like you on the program, and we try and make this be very conversational, right? Kind of what are you seeing in your specific industry segment? At the beginning there, I gave a brief bio. The other thing I'd like to really ask people to sort of kick it off is how did you get to where you are today, right? Kind of what was your path? What was your trajectory of your career?
When I think of my career journey, I have three components. The first is financial services as a foundation. And there I started in finance and led wealth management product organizations and $1 billion profit and loss. And through that process, I learned how to run organizations and financials along with leading growth initiatives at that time, applying digital and technology platforms of growth. So digitizing processes and moving to value. And then at the end, I reported to the CIO at Ameriprise, leading out client experience for the first time at the organization along with digital transformation. That really moved me then to the second phase of healthcare. So moved to United Health Group, looking at how to modernize operations and service, applying digital, and then introducing personalized experiences so that we can use data to make recommendations for better decisions. So consumers have better data to be informed of what's the next path for them. And during that time, then, I led the digital response for COVID for United Healthcare. That meant new digital assets and support, not just for the members at United, but we shared out our data with Apple, with other health plans, and with the White House. And what I learned from that experience was there is a leadership approach and model when the environment is fast-paced. In that case, it was in a crisis. And I led a financial product during the great financial crisis. And so that it's the same pattern of action along with shared frameworks. The pressure test, is this framework still working or do we need to move to the next framework? And I bring that up because I believe that's where we are right now with AI. It's not a financial crisis, it's not a pandemic, but it is a fast-paced external environment. At the third phase, then, for me, it's been leveling up at healthcare. So going, deeper and broader. So to your point of the VC firm applying AI for early diagnosis, the CEO for Children's Cancer Research Fund going deep into oncology, and looking at how AI is applied for speeding up this process that can take over a decade. How can we really get to those transformational insights and quickly go through or speeding it up through clinical trials to breakthroughs?
Wow. A lot of stuff here as you're talking here. I've been kind of writing down a bunch of different notes because, yeah, your background is really broad, but there's this sort of common thread that you were sort of talking about. And I really was thinking about transformation. Certain companies or organizations or industries kind of reach this threshold, like you said, like you got to move forward now. And you talk about frameworks. I guess, how do you know the framework that you're working on is actually still being successful in like the broad sense? We'll get into AI specifically, but you kind of tipped something off in my head. I was like, how do you know that you're kind of on the wrong path?
You know, it really becomes for me two components. One is you're co-creating internally with across all of the departments. So it's one team as opposed to silos. Also, up and down your organization. So, as an example, with COVID, it was developing here's the framework to support consumers, providers overall,
Mhm.
and pressure testing internally of does this look right? Everyone bringing their expertise of what about this, or here's, it sounds like a nuance, but it becomes a better framework of what we're trying to achieve as our goal.
Mhm.
And what are those then key lanes that we're going to put our development effort, our strategic effort, and obviously our people against it. The second thing are signals externally, always pressure testing. Is something moving? Is there a new problem that we're not solving for?
Mhm.
Or is there a new opportunity that we could be leaning into?
Yes, for sure. And I guess both of those, if you think about AI, they can be applied in both of those cases, right? And so we can focus on cancer research. I know we'll talk a fair amount here about healthcare just in general, because you were at UHC, the United Healthcare Group. Is that what it was?
Yes.
Yeah. And so, you were seeing it on that broad base level, but then you became this chief operating officer at Children's Cancer Research Fund. Like how are you seeing things different on the broad base versus kind of what you're doing as a COO?
At United Health Group, so much of the healthcare elements are owned within one umbrella. So it was a great experience to your point of learning end-to-end healthcare from a payer or health plan to care delivery to home health to pharmacy, all connected along with behavioral health. When children's cancer is the opposite, it's really a deep dive into one particular condition or disease type, but informed by and impacted by the full set as we think about mental health and the actual care delivery, health plans of how that integrates then with providers. The new element for me was going deep into the medical research perspective and stepping back and looking at how do we think about funding medical research and how can we use that same kind of end-to-end thinking to fund basic science, and as it continues to find insights, and I'll call them wins, to continue to fund them all the way through then to clinical trials to get to children. Because at the end of the day, our goal was to have new treatments, better outcomes for children with cancer. And I found that to be the most rewarding mission to have.
Yes, for sure. I think a lot of us, maybe as we get up in age, myself included, is like you're kind of looking for the project that has a little bit more meaning than just maybe making a company a little bit more money, right? So I think healthcare is one of those places that at least I feel personally drawn to it in some ways. My dad was an oncologist for his entire career, oncologist, hematologist. So a lot of leukemia, but all sorts of different types of cancer. And it's funny, late in my career now, he's basically sending me New England Journal of Medicine articles that I'm actually opening and listening and reading too. And again, I think I kind of maybe have to have a little bit more of this maturity. But when you take a look at what you were doing there, were you coming up with a lot of the solutions, or did you have? I'm just wondering how children's cancer research worked, because were you having doctors on staff, or were you getting grants to try and help, do the work? Like, what was your relationship with kind of moving the ball forward?
It's right. It's really three components. One, of course, is funding. So gathering the funds that we'd be able then to grant out to organizations and having highly expert professionals So it would be like your father on a board who would inform the science and the medicine along with then experts in AI. So we're looking at it across disciplines. But I found those experts to be some of the best humans I've met. They have the expertise, but also then they're directly working with the children. It's a gift and also a heavy heart at times to work through that.
Oh,
And
I'm
then
sure.
thirdly, we influenced across then at a national level with other experts and looking at, okay, what is our bigger picture strategy and how can we support your work and breadth of work?
Yeah. So what were some applications of AI? We kind of call this conversations on applied AI. So is it, a lot of it is drug research, I'm guessing, some of these things? Or are you guys looking at devices? Or I don't know. You tell me with some of the stuff that you have sort of seen it as you've been seeing, as you're working through this.
You're right. Some of it is really drug application. So it could be an existing drug that's already approved for an adult that you're testing. Can you apply it for a child? And the other thing, because, the numbers are lower with children with cancer, we also applied AI for the data side. Since it's a rare disease, you're looking at how can you not only aggregate the data, but use AI to find those signals and biomarkers.
Yeah, for sure. Like, how do you see healthcare changing in the next couple of years, I guess, with AI? What would be some dream come trues for you, I guess?
Well, when you look at it, I'll cover three trends that you're seeing. One is healthcare is moving into a consumer-driven, consumer-centric industry. And I feel like it's the last industry to move to more decisions made by the consumer in their daily lives. And so, as an example with wearables around health tech, AI pulling in and monitoring that data, but then also starting to aggregate the data for the full determinants of health. We know that genetics in care, just a component of drivers for your health, now will be expanding across. And with AI, you're able to see pattern matching then and moving to more recommendations directly made to the consumer rather than just through, let's say, your doctor. And, for that, one of the startups that I'm mentoring a CEO for, he has an AI first, multiple AI agent company, and he's using it for market research where you'd have different personas for market research. But I think also you could expand it to, let's say, behavioral change. And that goes into the second trend of healthcare moving to prevention as opposed to just, I'll call it sick care. If you're able to look at behavior change, how can we look at for who we are, precision medicine and, the best food? You can think about vitamins, you can think about exercise, of course, but it's moving then as an individual. What are those best informed decisions and how can I change my daily life?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, the earlier you can catch it up front and how can you change? I spoke on AI at this health and wellness conference a couple months ago or so, and that's really what it was all about. It's all about in the workplace, like how can you put these incentives, how can you incentivize people to kind of have better healthy habits, whether it's just doing 10,000 steps a day type thing, eating more fruits and vegetables, all that stuff. It's kind of like recycling, it feels like. People think, well, what can I do, right? This is just one little piece of thing that I'm doing, right? I'm going to recycle this bottle. What does that mean? Well, it adds up, and it's the same type thing. I think these behaviors. AI is such a broad term. It covers, I tell people it kind of covers machine learning and deep learning, and now we have this Gen AI thing. Maybe you could talk a little bit about maybe how you're seeing, well, obviously machine learning and deep learning and some of this drug discovery stuff, but are you seeing it applied to generative AI as well?
Yes. So from generative AI, in addition to the persona company we were just talking about, we also and have been applying it in the sales and marketing arena along with then strategic development, almost as that brainstorming partner.
Yeah.
Sometimes first draft, sometimes it's an edit or what's missing. And so I find with generative AI, we've certainly fully moved to this new, what I call intelligent transformation given that we're now in this exponential change because the models continue to improve, we have new tools, we have new adoption, higher adoption. And then what I think about is tech stacking on top of, and we talked about wearables a little bit, but you think about IoT overall, the amount of data now that we're collecting that's available that we can use then from a generative side.
Yes.
Interested
yes.
in, did you see other insights from your health conference that had an aha moments?
Yeah, I guess what I'm seeing, I'm not going to pick on that industry, but I'm just seeing all industries in general don't seem like they understand the power of what AI can do for them, right? Most people have used ChatGPT at a level where, okay, I'm just going to type in some things and it'll maybe help me rewrite my email, for example, right? But then kind of taking it to the next level of basically saying, well, why don't we have it rewrite your health and wellness policy within your company, right? And then obviously having it take some best practices and put those into place. You might have a health and wellness policy today, but wouldn't it be great if you could basically have it review that? Like you said, it's just this external thing that you could now, using good prompting and good conversational techniques, you could actually have it review my policy and am I meeting these specific guidelines or these specific requirements? I think as I talked to various companies that were there, a lot of them are doing these wearables. Like, they have all sorts of apps out there. We've been doing this for a long time, having kind of the gamification and having people sort of go against each other. But what I don't think companies are leveraging is that aggregate data information and then also kind of getting it back. And they're having a tough time. And again, I'm just sort of talking off the cuff here, but I think a lot of companies are even having a tough time proving the return on investment, right? That, okay, now we're having personalized nutrition plans or personalized emails that we're trying to get people enrolled in various programs. And it's difficult for them to sort of show because of AI or because of some of these personalization techniques, we're actually seeing this. But we all know that it's moving the needle in some capacity.
It's right. I think, we've seen some of the data. There's a spectrum of companies, and some really have taken to it. They have a strong pipeline. They're driving Gen AI and have been doing machine learning for a long time. But it looks like a huge chunk of companies are, to your point, in this testing R&D phase and unsure about, is this going to work out? And how I think about it is, it's a huge sea change. So this is a large wave that we're at the beginning stages of, that you need to get fully into the game. And to your point, you need to step back and say, okay, when the models continue to improve, what's possible or what problems are going to be about to be solved? And how will that change our strategy, but the overall market? Mm-hmm. And to your point, with the data that's being captured on wearables, as an example, and electronic health records, EMRs continue to get better. And we know another trend for healthcare is moving into your home. So that becomes, the smart home, all of your appliances, your daily habits can be built into your home for health. Yeah. But also age tech, as the baby boomers now continue to age. You're seeing use cases of fall prevention and protection so that you can see, okay, what does mom and dad need to do? They're about to fall. Let's change something in their environment. Right. Or is it time now to have that conversation to move them into assisted living or move up to the next step? Yeah. You start pulling all these pieces together, you can see the trend that we're getting there. And so at the R&D stage, I would say this is time now for the executive team to go deeper and build up more of that strategic point of view. Sure. And that's kind of what you do, right? Your job is to come in and take a look at what these companies are doing in this space and have them make sure that they are going to take advantage of as much new tech that they can, right? It is. And what I'm seeing also from my two boards is that we have now hit a tipping point, not only from an executive strategic plan, but also now boards are shifting into technology leadership, and AI is a core part of what they're doing. Yeah, it's going to become table stakes, I guess, in some ways, right? It's just the expectation is you're going to be leveraging AI in some capacity because there's just so much data. Tell me a little about the conversations around hallucination, because especially in these industries, like healthcare in particular, there has to be a fear of that with these companies that you're counseling and you're on the board of, or as you do work with them. How are some of those conversations going? To your point, obviously accuracy matters, but there are a couple different ways. Some are in terms of deploying additional monitoring to ensure the accuracy. Obviously, human in the loop becomes a component of many of these use cases when it really matters from a health side. But healthcare still has, let's say, sales and marketing, other components where you're able to get benefits of, let's say, lead generation, et cetera, where you're not at that same quality standards for initial drafts or additional research. So I don't see it as an all or nothing. And when you think about it from a board perspective, we've been guiding and leading organizations through technology continuously. And even with humans, of course, quality standards and metrics are a component of what we do. And so this is just pulling in AI into that same risk management model, the audit committee now, than it had been even a year ago.
Sure. Are you guys having any conversations around, like the future of work? I was out at a medical device company recently and we did a big workshop with them, and you could sense sort of the undercurrent was, when's AI going to take my job, right? Because it's becoming so capable in a lot of ways around sort of like the frontline engineers, for example, right? It's actually writing pretty good code. How are some of the conversations going with you and your colleagues and people at the board level?
I think that it's at the early stages. When I went deeper into, let's say, multi AI agents and can see how specialized roles you can create, you can immediately go to, let's say, a team of teams approach with specialists where they're collaborating, but also they're deep into knowledge. And you can design it so that they're solving and automating end-to-end processes where they're creating drafts, et cetera, or even how close to a finished product could they get to.
Yeah.
I do find it brings questions up of not only how are you building that first set of multiple AI agents, what is the end game in an organization of how many would you have, how are you designing it, and the architecture. But then how do you think about your organization and your employees, their development, and continually reinventing their role?
For sure. That leads me into probably the next line of questions I'm going to be asking you. And it really is about how do people get into this field, right? I think about people that are coming out of college, and the job field is always changing, right? I entered the job market in the mid 90s. The internet was just taking off, right? It was just sort of getting going. And I, kind of chose the internet as really, thank goodness for the internet. It really has sort of helped me. It was a great place for me to find a job. And I've had a lot of, obviously some great companies I've worked for and built some fun technology along the way because of the internet. But, I think about people that are leaving school now and just that idea that now these machines that we've built over time might actually be in competition with them. And I am like you. I sort of take this idea that I think it's going to make us to kind of like level up. We're going to have to continually be creative and curious and make sure that we look at what's next. So imagine me, I'm coming out of college. Like, what are some suggestions that you would have for somebody wanting to get into this field?
I think about it, the three threads for my whole career as I've moved further into AI across industries has been, learning. So you have obviously formal education that you can do, but also, and because AI is so fast moving, I think about podcasts, additional reading. Coursera has amazing classes. There are other online classes. And,
Yes.
Justin, what you offer through Applied AI also puts that real education and conversation. The second thing I think is actually using the tech.
Mhm.
And so, going deep on it, thinking about different use cases in your personal life, but then also it could be volunteering for a nonprofit on a side project. It could be volunteering for a project within work if you're not in an AI portion of the organization.
Sure.
And the third thing I think is really relationships and networking. So in your area nationally, who are people you can be mentored by? Who can you pair up in learning cohorts? How can you expand your network?
That is fabulous. No, I love that. I hadn't actually thought about it. Learn, I use it, and then relationships and networking. So, yeah. And I will say for people that are maybe the coders out there, I always encourage people just to hop on an open source project, right? There's just so much. I mean, that kind of combines number two and number three. You start networking with people that are oftentimes, building some really interesting stuff. You can learn a lot from them. And then you also get a chance to network with them. It might be your next job, but it also is a great resume builder. I will say, as I'm looking for new talent, I'm always asking people, yeah, what are you working on outside of your day-to-day job? Like, do you have a pet project or something you're exploring and experimenting with? So that's fabulous. That's fabulous. So yeah, we've covered a lot here. One of the things that I do like to ask is, yeah, what else have I missed? Was there something you came in that you wanted to make sure that we sort of talked about, Gene?
Well, for me, it's as we step back, the key goal is for us to lead the technology and not have the technology lead us. And you can see the momentum behind LLMs as an example, but broadly AI. And that really does mean from an executive side, from an employee side, we need to look at the strategy of the company and again, business led or, partnership, but we need to not just look at the tool, but what's the big picture? I think of the people as you brought up. I think of the operating model for delivery and for, monitoring. And then of course it's the data, tech, AI, infrastructure and architecture. That's really moving from this one use case to an organizational view. And it means instead of just bolting on AI, you need to step back and having it embedded throughout, again, the full framework.
Yeah, for sure. One of the questions I was going to ask you is I don't know if you read any books recently, if you wanted to share that you thought were interesting in this thing. But I did. I walk around and I tell people a lot about this book. And maybe you and I talked about this at one point, this Co-Intelligence by Ethan Malik. And
yes, I was at a conference with him.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So I would be fascinated to see him speak. I've watched a lot of his YouTube videos and I've listened to his book a couple times. And he has these 4 laws of AI that he talks about. And one of them is making sure that AI has a seat at the table. The other one is making sure that the human remains in the loop, right? We work collaboratively with this AI. The third one is, treat AI as a person, but make sure you tell it what kind of person you want it to be. All that is around prompting, right? So make sure act as this or respond to me in this type of way, because that actually has a number of, that will impact the way that the large language models will converse with you. And then the fourth one, it has a couple different nuances to it, but he says, assume this is the worst AI that you will ever use. And there's a couple of different components to that. Number one is, of course, it's just always going to get better. And so there's these sort of areas where AI doesn't work very good, but try it tomorrow and it might work better. But the other sort of sub-message behind that is that you need to make sure you build your systems in the way that you use these things in such a way that it's not just a one-off project. It's, that just understanding that you're going to be able to plug in new AI models and new systems along the way. And that as an organization, you really need to not view this as I'm going to do this little AI project and then we'll be done with it, right? It's going to be continually embedded in what you do. I think that maybe speaks to some of the things that you were talking about.
It is. And we are on such a fast curve right now. And again, when you look at where we're leading, I don't see the same kind of movement. So there's going to be some businesses I think are going to have a catching up period. The other thing he says, though, that we can reflect on for a while or talk about is for AI, there's no master plan and there's no user guide. And so, when I think about that, I think about, okay, that means we are in a race building technology, let's say overall, and it's to your point, what you make of it. And we need to think about strategically what's the first, second, and third order effects of it. Mm-hmm. And so, to your point of the internet and mobile and social media, there have been first, second, third order impacts that you and I wouldn't have thought about in mid-1990s.
For sure.
So for AI, what are those now? And how do we think about, again, leading the technology rather than being led by it or caught by surprise when we feel like it's so far down the road you can't move it back to what we want it to be. So I find this, again, with those components, as a CEO, I reflect on, do you have the right executive leadership team? Because this does mean you're looking at, it's more abstract. So you need conceptual thinkers, and it requires deep level of thinking where you're connecting the capability thinking along with the business thinking. And then you're looking at these dots, not just this year or the next 18 months, but again, many of these components moving simultaneously or within a period of time. And so when I talk to my peers, you'll hear them talk about this is humbling right now because it's moving so quickly. We're all learning as quickly as we can. But still humbling because not one person can know everything.
For sure, yeah. So everyone's going to contribute. No, I love that thought. There is no master plan or user guide. I also view it as, I almost feel like we're at the early days of like Newtonian physics or figuring out how the planets orbit around, because that's literally what people are doing right now. They're doing experiments, right? We're all experimenting in this space, not really knowing exactly where it's all going to play out.
And we do have additional scaffolding, or to your point, dropped pins from the history that we can look back and say, okay, what did we learn and where were we surprised and how can we apply it now?
Yes, for sure. Yeah, taking a historical view. The other book that I've been recommending a lot is a book called Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari, which is all about information networks. And he's a historian by trade. That's what he does. So he looks back at history. And if you haven't had a chance to read that one, that's really good. But this is where I personally fall down, a lot too, is actually taking the time to think back and say, we have hit these frontiers like this before in the past. There are some very unique things that I believe make AI different than just the invention of the calculator, people say. But the idea that it's going to cross over in all these different areas that we haven't even thought of is absolutely true. And I forgot where I read somewhere, but it's somebody imagined the car and the internal combustion engine, right? But they didn't imagine the drive-through, right? It was so far out of people's, and so who would have thought 100 years ago or whatever that we would actually take cars and the entire fast food industry would be born literally because of drive-throughs, and it was a technology that was never even dreamt of, but that's where we're at today. You would have never predicted that, right?
It is. And so to me, I think about, okay, how can we apply AI? Again, we talked about healthcare. So how do we improve health? How do we solve, let's say, climate change? So what are new options there? How do we rethink energy? How can we create, I'll call it an abundant society so that we can solve some of these larger problems that we can't think about solutions for as we sit here today?
Sure. And coming it back to the beginning, how do you bring these frameworks into place, right? So we talked about the very beginning.
Which, I don't know if you've read The Competing in the Age of AI. I really like that book.
Okay.
And it was written by 2 Harvard professors. The frameworks there hold up of how to think about AI. And they have a simple one I really like about creating value and capturing value. So I like the line of thinking that can then ground an executive leadership team so that we're looking at what's the end game versus, let's say, just starting from the tech and kind of chasing that.
No, yeah. One of the things that I talk to our organization a lot about. Yeah, you can get kind of see the new and shiny and you just start throwing technology at the problem first. And takes organizations a while to sort of backtrack and say, okay, what is the problem we're trying to solve here? How do people get a hold of you, Gene? I want to make sure that you get a chance to tell people. We'll put all this information in liner notes. I'll mention Competing in the Age of AI. We'll put a link to that book. But yeah, how do people find you, Gene?
The easiest way is through LinkedIn.
All right. I will put a link out to that for sure. And hopefully there will be some people on our program that want to engage with you and services. I see this just growing. There's a lot of, like you said, organizations that are sort of taking the leap and they're jumping forward, but there's a lot of them that need help. And that's what you provide to these companies is that leadership and that thoughtful planning and these frameworks to make sure that they have a chance to succeed.
Fantastic, Justin.
Excellent. Well, no, this was great. This was a great conversation. I appreciate your time. And you and I have been on a couple panels together and have sort of crossed paths. And so this was awesome to have you on the program. I look forward to having you a part of the Applied AI community in the future too.
You've listened to another episode of the Conversations on Applied AI podcast. We hope you are eager to learn more about applying artificial intelligence and deep learning within your organization. You can visit us at appliedai.mn to keep up to date on our events and connect with our amazing community. Please don't hesitate to reach out to Justin at appliedai.mn if you are interested in participating in a future episode. Thank you for listening.